Dr. Zeiler had seen many things in his long life. As a professor at the Galactic Academy, he had studied ancient civilizations from across the universe. But nothing had prepared him for this moment, the moment when he looked at the decoded symbols on his screen and realized that everything he thought he knew was wrong. The humans had done it. They had decoded an ancient language that even the most advanced alien species in the galaxy had failed to comprehend. And it wasn't just any language, it was the language of the Zalrith, an ancient race thought to have disappeared centuries ago. A race whose technology had once been the stuff of legend. As Dr. Zeiler sat frozen before the screen, his mind raced. How? How could humans, who had barely begun exploring the stars, have unlocked a secret so profound, so powerful? The Zalrith language had eluded even his people, the Drethians, for millennia. There had been rumors, legends whispered across the galaxies, of a language that could unlock unimaginable power. But no one had ever cracked it. Until now. Impossible, Dr. Zeiler muttered under his breath. He leaned closer to the screen, his hands trembling as he scrolled through the decoded symbols. They were perfect, no mistakes, no errors. Each symbol connected to the next with a fluidity that spoke of a deeper understanding, one that even the most brilliant minds of the Drethians had never come close to grasping. It wasn't just the language itself that stunned him. It was the message within the language, the way it spoke of a machine, a device capable of manipulating reality itself. A device that, if activated, could change the course of history. Dr. Zeiler's heart began to race. He had studied the Zalrith for decades. He knew the stories, the myths, the warnings. The machine described in the decoded text had the potential to reshape entire civilizations. It could elevate a species beyond the limits of their biology or bring about their annihilation. The Zalrith had left no instructions on how to activate it, only cryptic symbols and warnings. And yet, these humans, these primitive, untested creatures, had not only decoded the language but understood its meaning. The thought chilled him to his core. Dr. Zeiler's thoughts were interrupted by the soft chime of his communicator. A message had come through, urgent and encrypted. He quickly accepted the transmission, his mind still reeling from the implications of the discovery. The face of an alien diplomat from a distant star system appeared on the screen. Professor Zeiler, the diplomat's voice was calm, but there was a flicker of anxiety in his eyes. "We've been monitoring Earth's progress. We need to talk." Dr. Zeiler's breath caught in his throat. He knew exactly what this was about. The discovery of the Zalrith language had not gone unnoticed. It was only a matter of time before the other alien factions took an interest. And now, it seemed, the Drethians had to make a choice, one that could affect the future of both Earth and the galaxy. "We need to keep this quiet," Dr. Zeiler said, his voice steady but firm. "The humans have stumbled onto something far greater than they realize. If word gets out, it will be too late to stop it." The diplomat's face darkened. "The Council is already aware. We've been watching the humans. They are about to unlock the full potential of the language, and we fear what might happen once they do." Dr. Zeiler nodded grimly. "We can't allow them to misuse this power. But we also can't let them know that we are involved. For now, we observe. And we wait." The transmission cut off, leaving Dr. Zeiler alone with his thoughts. He sat in silence for a long moment, staring at the decoded symbols before him. There was no doubt about it. The humans had done something no other species had been able to do. And now, they were about to unlock a power that could change everything. He needed to know more. He needed to understand how they had done it. And most importantly, he needed to make sure that humanity wasn't left to their own devices when it came to handling this newfound power. Dr. Zeiler opened a new communication channel and began typing a message. He needed to reach Jack, the human who had led the decoding effort. The time for secrecy was over. They had to meet. And quickly. As Jack sat in his office at the University of New York, he couldn't shake the feeling that something big was about to happen. He had just returned from a long day of lecturing, his mind still buzzing from the breakthrough the team had made that afternoon. After years of painstaking work, they had finally cracked the ancient language of the Zalrith. But as he sat there, staring at the decoded symbols on his desk, he began to feel the weight of the situation. The implications of what they had unlocked were starting to settle in, and Jack had no idea how to handle it. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. He was just an ordinary guy, nothing special, really. A history professor who had always been fascinated by ancient cultures. But now, thanks to the Zalrith language, he was about to be thrust into a situation that could affect the entire world. The feeling of uncertainty was overwhelming, but there was no turning back now. The message he had decoded wasn't just a relic from the past, it was a blueprint for something far more dangerous and powerful than anyone had anticipated. And as he sat there, contemplating the next move, he had no idea that the galaxy was already watching, waiting to see what humanity would do with the power they had just unlocked. Jack was sitting in his office late that evening, the only light in the room coming from the faint glow of his computer screen. He hadn't expected much when he'd opened the strange encrypted message from Dr. Zyler, the alien professor he'd never met, but the message's contents were nothing short of life-altering. It was a call to meet in person, urgently. The implications of the decoded Zalrith language were too significant for email, too dangerous to be discussed over regular communication channels. Jack didn't know what to make of it, but something inside him told him he had to go. The message had been brief but unmistakable. Dr. Zyler had shared just enough information to intrigue him and to raise his suspicions. They weren't the first to decode the language, there had been others in the galaxy, many far more advanced than humanity, who had tried and failed. Now, Jack's team had succeeded. But why was this professor reaching out now? What did he know that Jack didn't? Jack closed his laptop and made the decision. He would go. He called a cab and within moments, was on his way to a nondescript location on the outskirts of the city, one that the professor had given him. The drive was long and silent, with the only sound coming from the hum of the car engine as his thoughts raced ahead of him. When Jack arrived, he found himself at the base of an old research facility hidden in a forest clearing. The building was almost eerily quiet, surrounded by thick trees and an unnatural stillness. It looked abandoned, as if no one had been there for years. And yet, when Jack stepped out of the car, the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. There was something unsettling about the place, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. He was ushered inside by a security guard who didn't ask any questions. As Jack walked through the dimly lit corridors of the facility, the walls seemed to close in around him. The air was thick, heavy with the weight of secrecy. It was clear that whatever was happening here, it was well beyond anything Jack had ever encountered. Finally, he was led into a large room at the center of the building, where Dr. Zyler waited. The alien professor stood with his back to the door, his sharp features outlined by the low light. When Jack entered, Dr. Zyler turned to face him, his wide eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Jack Thompson," Dr. Zyler said, his voice surprisingly soft yet authoritative. "I have waited a long time for this meeting. You have done what no one else could, what we, the Drethians, and others across the galaxy could not. You have decoded the Zalrith language." Jack hesitated for a moment before answering, his voice betraying the nerves he felt. "I'm not sure we did anything that extraordinary. We just followed the patterns, my team and I. We didn't know what we were unlocking." Dr. Zyler took a deep breath, his expression grave. "No, what you unlocked is far beyond anything you can imagine. The Zalrith were not simply a lost civilization. They were a warning that you, and all of humanity, will soon understand." The words hit Jack like a punch to the stomach. His instincts told him this was serious, but the tone in Dr. Zyler's voice made it clear that he wasn't just speaking figuratively. The Zalrith, Dr. Zyler continued, discovered a way to manipulate not just technology, but reality itself. The device they left behind, described in the language you decoded, is no ordinary machine. It is capable of altering the very fabric of space and time. It can bend the laws of physics, create energy from nothing, and even change the course of history. Jack felt a shiver run down his spine. Wait. You're saying this device, this machine, it's real? Dr. Zyler nodded solemnly. More real than you can comprehend. And it's hidden. I've spent my entire life studying the Zalrith and their technology. No one knew how to activate the machine, not even the greatest minds of my species. But now, with the decoding of the language, it seems the humans, your people, have found the key. Jack felt a lump form in his throat. His heart raced. He had been part of something far larger than he could have ever imagined. He had unlocked something that could change the universe itself. But now, the weight of responsibility crushed him. He wasn't just a professor anymore. He was standing on the edge of something far greater than anything he had prepared for. You say the Zalrith left this device behind, Jack said, trying to steady his voice, but why? And why haven't we heard of it before now? Dr. Zyler's eyes darkened. The Zalrith disappeared because they could not control what they had unleashed. The machine they created was meant to be a tool of evolution, a way to transcend the limitations of their biology. But in the wrong hands, it could lead to destruction. And now, humans have stumbled upon it. Jack's stomach churned. He had always dreamed of finding something that could change the course of history. But this was something far beyond anything he had ever imagined. And now, the weight of the discovery was crashing down on him. How do we stop it? Jack asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Zyler took a step forward. You don't. Not unless you understand the true nature of the machine. You must understand its purpose, its creators, and the cost of using it. Jack's mind was spinning. He had questions, so many questions. But one thing was clear, he had to be a part of this. There was no turning back now. What do I need to do? Jack asked, his voice firm. Dr. Zyler met his gaze, his expression resolute. The next step is simple, we find the machine. But be warned, Jack. There are others who want it, and they will stop at nothing to get their hands on it. The days following Jack's meeting with Dr. Zyler blurred together. The weight of the revelation that humanity had unknowingly uncovered an ancient, universe-altering machine weighed heavily on him. The professor's words echoed in his mind, there are others who want it, and they will stop at nothing to get their hands on it. Jack couldn't ignore the feeling that every passing moment brought them closer to a dangerous unknown. Dr. Zyler had given him instructions to gather his team and prepare for the next phase, locating the hidden Zalrith device. Jack had always prided himself on his methodical approach to problem solving, but this was beyond anything he had prepared for. Every lead seemed to lead into darkness, every step further into the unknown. Jack spent hours poring over maps and encrypted files with his colleagues, trying to make sense of the fragmented clues left behind in the ancient language. Despite all their efforts, the puzzle pieces didn't fit together. The Zalrith language was a delicate web of symbols, each layer meaning something deeper, something more complex than simple translation. The machine was supposed to be hidden in plain sight, but where? How? Jack's mind drifted back to the moment when Dr. Zyler had told him the most chilling part of the story. The machine had been created to transcend the limitations of biology, but in the wrong hands, it could lead to destruction. If the Zalrith had made a mistake, could humanity repeat it? 2 weeks passed, and Jack's team had found little more than dead ends. Just when he thought they might have to abandon their search, an unexpected breakthrough came, an encrypted message arrived, but it wasn't from Dr. Zyler. It was from someone, or something, else. The message was simple but disturbing, you found it. We will take it from here. Jack stared at the screen, his heart pounding. He knew immediately that whoever sent this wasn't a friend. He had been warned, and now, the danger had arrived. The threat was real. He called Dr. Zyler, hoping for some guidance, but the professor was already one step ahead. "Jack, there's no time to explain. We've been compromised," Zyler said, his voice grave. "We need to move fast. Get your team and head to the rendezvous point. I'll explain everything when you arrive." With a sense of urgency tightening in his chest, Jack ordered his team to prepare for the worst. They had no idea who was after them or how they had tracked them, but it was clear now, this wasn't just a scientific discovery. It was a race against time, a race against whoever or whatever was on the other side of that message. The rendezvous point was a hidden safe house located far off the beaten path, deep in a remote region where very few had access. Jack trusted Dr. Zyler, but his instincts told him there was more at play here than he was being told. How had the enemy found them so quickly? What did they know about the Zalrith device? And who were they working for? As Jack and his team made their way to the safe house, the tension in the air thickened. Every sound, every shadow felt like an omen. The group moved cautiously, always scanning their surroundings, but it didn't take long for them to realize they weren't alone. A rustling in the trees. The distant sound of a vehicle engine. Then, the unmistakable hum of technology, something high-tech, alien even, hidden just out of sight. Jack's pulse quickened. They were being followed. "Stay sharp," he whispered to his team, gripping his weapon tighter. The group quickened their pace, moving deeper into the woods. They were close, but they weren't safe. Not yet. They reached the safe house after what felt like an eternity, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence of the surrounding wilderness. The building was fortified, isolated, and seemingly impenetrable. It was a stronghold, a place designed to keep out threats from all directions. Jack breathed a sigh of relief when they finally arrived, but his sense of unease didn't lessen. If anything, it deepened. As soon as they entered, Dr. Zyler was waiting for them, his eyes flickering with a mix of urgency and concern. The moment Jack stepped through the door, Zyler locked it behind him. "Jack, listen to me very carefully," the professor said, his voice steady but with a trace of fear. "They've found us, and they won't stop. Whoever is after the Zalrith device, they're not just rogue scientists or treasure hunters. They are a powerful faction with resources that span galaxies. And they know the machine exists." Jack's heart skipped a beat. He had suspected it, but hearing it aloud made it all too real. This wasn't just about the Zalrith anymore. This was a war over control of something that could rewrite the laws of the universe. "What do we do now?" Jack asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Zyler paced the room, hands clasped behind his back, his mind racing. "We find the machine first. If they get to it before us, it's not just the end of us. It's the end of everything." Jack swallowed hard, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He had never thought of himself as a hero, but the world was asking him to be one. And the stakes couldn't have been higher. "Let's get started then," Jack said, his voice steady, even though his insides were anything but calm. As the night fell, the group began to formulate a plan. Jack knew there were risks, but they didn't have time to dwell on them. The machine was out there, and they needed to act before it fell into the wrong hands. Jack and his team spent the night inside the safe house, strategizing their next move. Dr. Zyler had been clear, they had to stay ahead of their pursuers, but the information they were working with was limited at best. The Zalrith device wasn't just a tool, it was a key to a new chapter of human history, one that, in the wrong hands, could bring about chaos and destruction. As dawn broke over the horizon, the air felt thick with tension. The team knew the time to act was fast approaching. They couldn't afford to wait any longer. Jack briefed his colleagues on the plan, a covert operation to infiltrate a highly secure facility where the Zalrith device was rumored to be hidden. The mission was dangerous, and they had no idea what they would find when they got there. "We'll move in groups," Jack said, his voice low but firm. "Keep your heads down and don't engage unless absolutely necessary. The goal is to get in, find the device, and get out before anyone knows we're there." Dr. Zyler had given them the coordinates to the facility. According to his intel, it was an old military research complex that had long since been abandoned. But hidden within its rusted walls was the most valuable secret of all, the Zalrith device. They set out in the early morning, their footsteps muffled by the dense woods surrounding the safe house. Jack's heart pounded in his chest, his thoughts a whirl of what-ifs. Every step took them closer to the unknown, closer to a powerful artifact that could change everything they knew about life, the universe, and the laws of physics. After several hours of navigating through rough terrain, the group arrived at the complex, a nondescript building surrounded by overgrown vegetation and abandoned equipment. The place felt eerie, as if the walls themselves were hiding something terrible. Jack's gut twisted with unease. "This is it," he whispered to his team. They approached cautiously, using the trees for cover. The complex seemed abandoned, but Jack knew better. It was too quiet, too still. He motioned for his team to spread out, checking for any signs of life or unexpected movement. Just as they were about to make their way inside, a low hum filled the air. A distant sound at first, but growing louder by the second. It was a vehicle, someone was coming. Jack's instincts kicked in. They couldn't afford to be discovered. "Get inside, now," Jack ordered. The team scrambled, rushing for the entrance. They managed to slip through a side door just in time, ducking behind a stack of crates. The sound of the vehicle grew louder and closer, its engine humming with power. Whoever it was, they weren't just passing by. Jack peered through a crack in the door. A sleek, black vehicle with military-grade technology pulled up outside, its engine cutting off as the driver stepped out. It was clear now, they weren't the only ones searching for the Zalrith device. "Stay down," Jack whispered urgently, his eyes narrowing as he recognized the figure stepping out of the vehicle. The tall, imposing figure wore dark combat gear, a mask obscuring their face. But it wasn't just the military uniform that caught Jack's attention, it was the emblem on the person's chest. A symbol he had seen before, during his brief encounter with Dr. Zyler. The faction that was after the device. "This is bad," Jack muttered. "They've found us." His team held their breath as they watched the stranger approach the complex's main entrance. The figure was clearly well-trained, moving with the precision of someone accustomed to battle. It was clear that this person wasn't just here to steal information, they were here to take the device and whatever secrets it held. The stranger disappeared inside the building, and Jack exchanged a look with his team. They had to act now. "Move fast," Jack ordered. "We don't have much time." Inside the facility, the group split up into smaller teams. Jack and his closest allies, including a tech expert named Mia and a former soldier named Eric, made their way to the control room. They needed to access the building's surveillance system to track down the device before it could be moved again. The others would keep an eye on the perimeter, ensuring they weren't caught off guard by anyone else. The deeper they moved into the complex, the more unsettling it became. The rooms were dark, the walls lined with dust-covered equipment that hadn't seen use in years. But the silence wasn't comforting, it was ominous. Every step felt like it might trigger a hidden alarm or an unknown danger. "Over here," Mia said, her voice barely above a whisper as she located the control room. The door creaked as they entered, and she immediately got to work, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she bypassed the security systems. Jack watched the screens closely, his mind racing. Time was running out, and the situation was growing increasingly dire. They needed to find the device, and fast. "I've got something," Mia said, pointing to one of the monitors. A map of the facility lit up, and there, in the lower levels, was a glowing red dot labeled Zalrith. It was clear as day now, the device was closer than they thought. But before they could celebrate their discovery, the door to the control room exploded open. Jack barely had time to react as the masked figure from earlier stormed in, a weapon raised. "Not so fast," the stranger growled. Without thinking, Jack dove toward the figure, knocking the gun out of their hands. A struggle ensued, fierce and chaotic, but Jack's military training kicked in, his reflexes fast and precise. Eric joined the fray, tackling the stranger from behind. The battle was short but intense. When the dust settled, the stranger lay unconscious on the ground, their mask now lying discarded at their feet. Jack knelt to examine the person, and what he saw shocked him to the core. Beneath the mask was someone he knew, someone who had been part of his team. "Sarah," he muttered, disbelief filling his voice. Jack stared at Sarah, her eyes still closed as she lay unconscious on the floor of the control room. His heart was a tangled mess of confusion and anger. He had known Sarah for years, trusted her with his life. She had been there through thick and thin, never wavering in her loyalty. Or so he had thought. Eric stood beside Jack, his expression hardening. "You knew her, right? I mean, she's one of us." "I thought she was," Jack muttered, kneeling beside Sarah. "But clearly, I was wrong." They both stood in silence for a moment, processing the situation. The weight of betrayal hung in the air like a thick fog. They had to make a choice. Either they risk everything to learn why Sarah had turned against them, or they left her behind and continued their mission, knowing the enemy was already one step ahead. Jack's mind raced. He couldn't afford to lose anyone else, not now, not with everything at stake. But he also knew they couldn't take her with them, not until they understood why she had sided with their enemies. "Do we wake her up?" Eric asked, his voice laced with caution. "She could be dangerous." Jack glanced down at Sarah. Her face, even unconscious, seemed like a stranger now. He had no answers, but he knew one thing for sure, this wasn't just about the Zalrith device anymore. There was a bigger game at play, and it involved people they thought they could trust. "We wake her up," Jack said, his voice firm despite the uncertainty inside him. "We get answers." As Sarah stirred, her eyes fluttered open. At first, she seemed disoriented, her gaze unfocused, as if trying to make sense of the situation. When her eyes landed on Jack, a flicker of recognition passed through them, followed by something darker, guilt, maybe? But it was gone before Jack could analyze it. "Jack," she whispered hoarsely. I didn't want it to go this far." Jack knelt beside her, his voice a low whisper. "Why, Sarah? Why did you do this?" Her lips trembled. "You have no idea what you're up against. You're not ready for this, for what they can do." Jack's mind spun. He had questions, so many questions. But right now, he needed clarity. "Who is they, Sarah? Who are you working for?" Sarah's eyes flickered to Eric, then back to Jack. She hesitated before speaking, her words cautious. "I'm not working for them. I was trying to stop them. But I couldn't do it alone. I thought if I could get close to you, close enough to understand your mission, maybe I could use the device against them." Jack's heart skipped a beat. The Zalrith device wasn't just a tool to them. It was a weapon, a powerful one that could reshape everything. "You were trying to stop them? By using the device? What do you know about it, Sarah?" Her face paled as she struggled to sit up. "I know that the device can unlock secrets about our origins, about our future. It was never meant to fall into the wrong hands. The people after it don't want to use it for the good of humanity. They want to use it to control the entire world." Jack absorbed her words carefully. This wasn't just about protecting a dangerous artifact, it was about preventing a new era of tyranny. But if the device was so powerful, could they really protect it? Then why did you join us? Eric asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. If you knew what it could do, why betray us? I didn't know how else to get close enough, Sarah admitted. I had to make them think I was on their side to learn more. I thought if I could get you to trust me, I could find a way to destroy it before they used it. But the closer I got, the more I realized I was too deep into this. I couldn't pull out. Jack clenched his fists, torn between anger and empathy. She had been playing a dangerous game, and had nearly lost herself in the process. He could see the genuine remorse in her eyes, but how could he trust her now? Do you expect us to just let you go? Eric asked, voice shaking with frustration. Sarah's gaze shifted between Jack and Eric, her lips trembling as she spoke. No. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even deserve it. But I can help you stop them. I know how to find the device and destroy it before they get their hands on it. Jack exhaled sharply, weighing his options. They couldn't let the device fall into the wrong hands, but could they trust Sarah to help them? Her words rang with honesty, but her actions spoke of betrayal. We're running out of time, Jack said finally. We have to make a choice. Help us stop this, Sarah, or we leave you behind. No second chances. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes as she nodded. I'll help you. But we need to move fast. They're coming. They know we're here. With little time to waste, Jack and Eric helped Sarah to her feet. The team was in disarray, but they couldn't afford to let the turmoil slow them down. The enemy was closing in, and the fate of the Zalrith device, along with the future of humanity, hung in the balance. They made their way through the complex, now more determined than ever. Jack's thoughts were torn between trust and caution. Could he truly count on Sarah? Or had she played a game too dangerous for anyone to win? The deeper they ventured, the more uneasy Jack became. They were headed into the heart of enemy territory now, and the risks were greater than ever before. But there was no turning back. They had to stop the device from falling into the wrong hands. Jack's mind raced as he, Eric, and Sarah moved cautiously down the corridor. Every step felt heavier than the last. They had no idea how close the enemy was, but they couldn't afford to hesitate. The Zalrith device was within their reach, and with it, the future of humanity. Sarah's presence was a constant reminder of the uncertainty they were now facing. Jack couldn't shake the nagging feeling that, despite her assurances, she had hidden something crucial. But the greater danger loomed ahead, the device. Time was running out. Stay sharp, Jack whispered to Eric as they reached a reinforced door at the end of the hall. It was a gateway into the lab where the Zalrith device was held, or at least where they believed it was. The door had been sealed tight for years, but they had found a way in. They just had to hope it was the right one. We're almost there, Sarah murmured, her voice tense. They won't expect us to get this far. Jack couldn't tell if she was trying to reassure them or herself. Either way, they had no choice but to trust her, at least for now. With a sharp motion, Eric drew a small tool from his pack and started working on the door's security system. The silence around them was oppressive, every sound echoing in the stillness. Jack's pulse quickened as he glanced at Sarah, who stood at the rear of the group, watching the corridor with wary eyes. Her nervousness wasn't lost on him. What's really going on here, Sarah? Jack asked, his voice low. You said you were trying to stop them, but now you're saying they're coming for us. Who's coming for us? Sarah hesitated, her gaze flickering to the door that Eric was working on. They're not just after the Zalrith device, Jack. They're after control. Power. The kind of power that can reshape history, bend it to their will. Jack's grip tightened on the handle of his weapon. And you think you can stop them? After everything? I can help you, Sarah said, her eyes pleading. But we need to act quickly. We're running out of time. The door clicked open, and Eric pushed it aside. A sudden rush of cold air swept through the room, and they all stepped inside. It was a high-tech laboratory, far more advanced than anything Jack had ever seen. On the far side of the room, a massive vault sat, its walls gleaming with a metallic sheen that seemed almost otherworldly. In front of it, a solitary figure stood. It was tall, clad in a sleek black uniform that matched the rest of the facility. Their face was obscured by a helmet, but Jack could feel the weight of their presence. "We knew you were coming," the figure said, their voice cold and mechanical. "And now you're too late." The room seemed to pulse with tension. Jack didn't move, his mind working rapidly as he processed the situation. They had walked right into the enemy's trap. The figure raised a hand, and a series of monitors flickered to life on the wall, displaying images of the Zalrith device. Jack's heart sank. They had no time left. The device was already activated, and in the wrong hands, it would bring disaster. "Who are you?" Jack demanded. "What do you want with the device?" The figure's laughter was chilling. "What we want, Jack, is something you could never understand. The Zalrith device is the key to unlocking a new era, an era where we control everything. Every decision. Every action." Sarah stepped forward, her voice trembling with emotion. "You don't know what you're doing. You think you're in control, but you're just puppets, and the strings are about to break." The figure tilted their head, an almost imperceptible movement. "You think you can stop us? You're all fools. The power is ours, and you're nothing more than obstacles." Jack took a deep breath, fighting the wave of anger that surged through him. This wasn't just a battle for survival, it was a battle for the future. "Not if I have anything to say about it," Jack muttered, his hand tightening around his weapon. Without warning, the figure lunged toward the vault, their movements too quick to follow. Jack's instincts kicked in, and he fired. But the figure was already gone, vanishing into thin air. The room erupted in chaos. Monitors flashed red, alarms blaring as the entire system locked down. The enemy had anticipated their every move. Jack barely had time to react before the vault doors began to open, revealing the glowing core of the Zalrith device. It pulsed with energy, sending waves of heat and light throughout the room. "Stop them," the figure's voice came over the intercom, filled with malevolent power. "The device is ours. You will not stop what's coming." Jack's mind raced. The device had to be destroyed, but how could they possibly stop it now? The entire facility was working against them, and they were up against an enemy with technology far beyond their own. He looked at Sarah, who seemed more determined than ever. "What do we do now?" Jack asked, his voice urgent. Sarah's eyes narrowed as she assessed the situation. "We do what we came here to do. We destroy it." "But how?" Eric asked, his voice tinged with doubt. "We don't have the power to take it down. It's too far gone." Sarah stepped forward, her gaze fixed on the device. "I've seen it before," she said, her voice steady. "There's a failsafe built into the system, but it's hidden. We just need to find it." The clock was ticking. The room was closing in, the walls pressing in on them as the Zalrith device powered up to full capacity. They couldn't let it fall into the wrong hands. "Jack, Eric, keep the enemy occupied," Sarah said quickly. "I'll find the failsafe. Stay sharp." As Sarah moved toward the device, Jack and Eric positioned themselves between her and the advancing enemy forces. The tension was unbearable. Every movement felt like it could be their last, and yet, they had no choice but to keep fighting. The fate of the world rested on Sarah's ability to find the key to destroying the device. As Sarah approached the glowing core, she hesitated. She could feel the energy radiating off the device, its power pulsing in the air around her. With a determined breath, she activated a small hidden panel at the base of the device, hoping against hope that the failsafe was still intact. Sarah's fingers hovered over the hidden panel on the Zalrith device. The energy swirling around her seemed almost alive, crackling with power as the device hummed louder with each passing second. She knew the failsafe had to be there, but would she find it in time? The seconds were slipping away, and the weight of the world rested on her shoulders. Jack and Eric stood just a few feet away, their weapons trained on the advancing enemy. The figure in the black uniform was nowhere to be seen, but the room was filling with more and more soldiers, each one equipped with advanced weapons, all prepared to stop them at any cost. "Sarah, hurry!" Jack shouted over the rising noise of the alarms. His voice was filled with urgency. "We don't have much time." "I'm trying." Sarah's voice was strained, her eyes scanning the interface. The faintest glimmer of hope flickered in her chest as she noticed a small hidden switch, just below the main activation panel. With trembling fingers, she pressed it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a soft clicking sound echoed through the room, and a secret compartment opened, revealing a small, encrypted device. The failsafe. Sarah's heart raced. She had found it. But the room had become a battlefield. Jack and Eric were firing their weapons, trying to hold off the advancing soldiers, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Every shot seemed to bring more enemies pouring into the lab, their uniforms glowing in the light of the Zalrith device. "You've made a mistake, Sarah," a cold voice said from behind her. The figure in the black suit had appeared again, standing tall and unyielding. "You think you can destroy it? You're just delaying the inevitable." Sarah didn't turn around. Her focus was entirely on the failsafe. The encrypted device was their only chance. She had no choice but to trust it. "Get ready!" Sarah yelled at Jack and Eric. "We're going to need everything we've got to get out of here." Jack nodded, his face grim as he held off a wave of soldiers charging toward them. But it wasn't just the soldiers they were up against anymore. The very room they were standing in was now a ticking time bomb, and every moment they delayed risked giving the Zalrith device the power it needed to rewrite history. Sarah activated the failsafe, and the room suddenly went silent. The Zalrith device's hum shifted to a low, threatening growl as the encrypted device powered up. The energy around them intensified, and the walls trembled. "What did you do?" the figure demanded, his voice laced with fury. "You're too late." But Sarah's eyes remained locked on the device as she continued to work the encryption. It was a race against time. The countdown had begun, and the Zalrith device was now fully operational. Jack's voice rang out once more. "Sarah, this isn't just about stopping them. This is about making sure they never have the power to do this again. We can't let them get away." The figure took a step forward, rage clear in his eyes. "You think you're stopping us? We are the future. We control the past, the present, and the future. And nothing you do will change that." Sarah's fingers flew over the failsafe's controls, inputting the necessary commands. It was a complex sequence, but she had studied the device for months. She knew exactly what she needed to do. And then, with a final press of a button, she initiated the self-destruct sequence. A moment of pure silence filled the room, followed by a low, rumbling sound. The Zalrith device had activated its final fail-safe, one that would cause it to implode upon itself, destroying everything within its range. The figure's eyes widened in disbelief. "You can't. No. You don't know what you've done." The rumble grew louder as the Zalrith device began to self-destruct. The walls cracked, the lights flickered, and the very air seemed to thicken with the energy of impending doom. The countdown was reaching its final seconds. "Run!" Sarah shouted, turning to Jack and Eric. The three of them bolted toward the door, but it was too late. The ground beneath them shook violently as the facility began to collapse, the walls cracking and crumbling around them. Jack could feel the intense heat building in the room as they raced toward the exit. "Come on, Sarah," Jack urged, looking over his shoulder. Eric was already ahead, his focus solely on getting them out alive. But the door that had once been their escape route was now sealed shut. A massive explosion sent shockwaves through the building, throwing them off their feet. But even as the chaos enveloped them, Jack had one thought: they had done it. The Zalrith device was gone. The future was safe. The world outside was bathed in a sudden, blinding light as the device's core collapsed in on itself, destroying the complex and everything within it. But they had escaped, just barely. Aftermath. The trio emerged from the ruins of the facility, their faces covered in dust, but their hearts filled with relief. Behind them, the remains of the Zalrith device smoldered, reduced to nothing more than rubble. They had stopped it. They had saved humanity from an unimaginable fate. Jack's legs trembled with exhaustion as he looked at Sarah. She had kept her promise, and together they had destroyed the device. He could see the weight of the mission lift from her shoulders, but there was still something more. "You did it," Jack said quietly. Sarah looked at him, her expression solemn. "We did it. But it's not over. There will always be others who seek power, others who try to rewrite history. We have to stay vigilant." Jack nodded. He understood now. The battle wasn't just about one device, it was about preserving the balance of power, about making sure that humanity's future was never taken for granted. They had won, but there would always be more challenges ahead. And as the sun began to set on the horizon, casting long shadows over the rubble, Jack couldn't help but feel a surge of hope. Despite the darkness that often loomed over them, humanity's strength would always rise to the occasion. They were resilient. And together, they would face whatever came next.